Aloha friends, this is Leviathan here from BlizzPro, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Holy Hoover Crusader build. We premiered this bad boy last week on the West March workshop, and if you haven't checked out that podcast yet, I highly recommend it. We're on iTunes and Stitcher. We're also on YouTube over on Archon Inferno Fridays channel, and that was the first place that I introduced this build. So if you want some more informal, kind of chatty discussion of this build, I definitely recommend checking that out. Otherwise, just stay tuned and I'll give you the skills, gear, Paragon, and follower notes that you need to run this build. I want to start out by saying that this is a patch 2.1.2 PTR tested build, so it might change when it goes to live, but this is something that I might be using next season once I have the acquired gear, because I think it'll really shine in Greater Rifts with the changes that happened from the density, as well as the increased density, I should say, as well as the changes to the health and especially the damage output of mobs. It's a lot more tuned down, so you can take a lot more hits, and that kind of helps this build shine. So without further ado, let's start. You can see that our primary generator here is going to be Slash with Zeal. I personally prefer builds that use a generator. I know some people like to forego them at times, but for me it kind of helps things stay smooth. It kind of gives me something to have that left click focus on, and especially with Zeal, you gain attack speed stacks, which help in terms of proccing your Miranite gem, which again, this is a holy build, so that's pretty useful in terms of getting that holy damage sent for single target DPS situations, which is where this build falls down a little bit. So I really do like Slash with Zeal. Some other options might be to run Electrify if you want to get a stun in for a little bit more CC. Maybe you're helping your friends out. You can also possibly run Smite with Reaping, and that'll just get you some really nice healing if you feel like your sustainability is a bit low. But I highly recommend Slash with Zeal. The main skill here is of course Condemn with Vacuum. That's where the name comes from. Normally people run it with Unleashed, and that makes perfect sense because you get your DPS right then and there, you know, no bones about it. You can guarantee where the hit's going to be. With Vacuum, it's a little more, you have to predict when you're going to pull things in, what position you'll be at when the explosion goes off. So it's a bit of a higher skill cap, if you will, on Vacuum, but the true power of it is the fact that you can suck a lot of mobs that you normally couldn't vacuum up before, with the changes that they made to monsters in the Realm of Trials. They also have extended those changes to monsters in Greater Rifts, so you can actually vacuum quite a bit of the monsters that you'll find, and that means that you can just constantly move around the rift, picking up more mobs, and as you get more of them, you'll be getting more condemns off because of the Blade of Prophecy synergy, which we'll go into once we hit the gear. The first utility skill that we have is Iron Skin with Flash. Normally here the main skill would be, or the main rune would be Steel Skin, which just allows you to have that Iron Skin up a little bit longer. But Flash here really shines because you're going to be constantly surrounded by monsters when you're doing your vacuums, and if you get to a position where you vacuum and you get kind of stuck, you didn't quite get the pathing right, this helps you get out of jail for free. It basically will allow you to run through mobs unhindered, especially at a high movement speed once you actually do get hit. And that means you can also run through Valor, and it's a really good get out of dodge skill. Highly recommend that you keep this on your bar at all times if you're going to run Vacuum. Akarat's Champion with Profit is kind of a no-brainer. This is what you want to strive for once you have your con set, and once you have your CDR capped off at around 56% on gear. This will allow you to have full-time Akarat's Champion up. And with Profit, you get a huge bonus to your damage, a huge bonus to your toughness. I should say the damage comes from just Akarat's Champion in general. The huge bonus to your toughness comes from Profit itself. And then, of course, the added benefit with Akarat's Champion is that extra Wrath regen, which, of course, is something that always plagues Crusaders. For Laws, speaking of that Wrath problem, I'm running Laws of Valor with Unstoppable Force. And this is a slot that's kind of flexible. You can possibly run some of the other laws if you feel like you're running low on maybe just your toughness in general, some of your survivability. But I really like Laws of Valor with Unstoppable Force because it essentially allows you to run Vacuum without ever stopping using it because you don't have enough Wrath. It's truly amazing what this law can do for you, so I highly recommend keeping it until you find a way to mitigate Wrath better through your gear. Lastly, Provoke with Too Scared to Run. Some people do like to use Provoke with charged up just for the extra DPS, but I find that with too scared to run, it does help when you get the mobs pretty piled up around you, and it's just another way to, you know, CC them, make sure their attacks are a little bit slower so you can mitigate the damage coming in, you know, utilize your life per second and other stats to heal you back up, and get the cuts coming in a little bit slower. And it also just helps them not move too quickly away from you, so you can keep that vacuum reliably pulling the enemies forward in the rift. For your passives, it's pretty standard. Heavenly Strength because it's a two-hander build using the Blade of Prophecy. Indestructible because dying sucks and you want to avoid it even when you do die. So that's pretty no-brainer there, especially because this is also a build that I'm exhibiting here on Hardcore. And that's why I'm really excited about this build, because versions of it were running around for Softcore, but this is actually something you could reliably do in Hardcore at high greater rifts. Holy Cause is a passive that you may want to look into other options. It's your other flexible spot here in this build. I just like it because of the 10% damage, and also the fact that this is a holy build means that you're going to gain that second part of the passive, which gets you some life back whenever you do holy damage. Lastly, Finery, a staple for Crusaders, especially now that we're getting more and more reason to have sockets in our gear with the legendary gems. So pretty much no-brainer here. Going into the gear, Akon's 6-piece, and I say 6-piece because we're actually not utilizing the Leoric's crown, the famous Leoric's crown. Once you have CDR in the right places, you know, on your Unity, for instance, on your SOJ, if you can get an SOJ with a socket, that's when it's divine, because you can put CDR on there instead of strength. And then you'll have your socket, so you can put a gem in there, a legendary gem. You'll have your CDR to help with the cap. And then, of course, still your holy damage, and then your damage to elites as well. So it's just an insane ring, but that's also really hard to find. So you can see here that I'm actually not running a socket, which means I only have 2 legendary gems in this build. But yes, so that means no Ring of Royal Grandeur, because the other ring in this build is a Unity, which is highly important just for the amount of damage that you will be taking being in melee range. You definitely want to maintain a Unity at all times, and having a CDR Unity means you're closer to that cap and not worrying about having to use a Leoric's crown in the first place. Your stat priority on your gloves and your shoulders, you do want CDR on there. And then the rest, you can see we're running a little bit more defensively here. If you wanted to, you could try running with cooldown reduction, strength of it, and condemn damage, just to get a little bit more out of your condemns. But I really like having the all resist there, simply because you do need a high level of toughness in the higher greater rifts. Your gloves are really just DPS oriented, crit and crit damage, nice strength. You do want those secondaries, something that people often overlook. Your secondaries, if you're not using all res on a piece, then you want your secondary to have at least one of the other single resistances that you don't have on other pieces. So basically what I'm saying is don't let them overlap. So you want like fire resistance here, you would want lightning resistance here, you would want, you know, arcane on your helm or something like that. You can see I doubled up on lightning, which honestly isn't all that bad because electrified is a pretty terrifying elite affix, but you know, you would like some diversity there. But pretty standard on the helm as well, just the crit chance, strength, and vit in the socket. I have the Eye of Etlich as my amulet, which is really strong because of the secondary where your damage from ranged attacks, which is actually a lot of elite affixes. Most people may not have that knowledge, but most of the elite affixes do actually count as ranged, so this is a huge reduction to them. I believe this can roll up to 35%, yes. So that would be the bee's knees, but this is not a bad one by any means either. You can see I'm using the Bane of the Trapped in here, jumping around a little bit, but since I'm exhibiting it right now, using the Bane of the Trapped because, again, it's a melee build, so all the mobs are always under the effect of this Bane of the Trapped as long as they're around you. And you're just going to do a little bit more damage, and by a little bit, I mean a lot. In the Unity, which I showed before, you roll the strength off to get the socket or the CDR, depending on which it naturally rolls with, and that's how you get a really good Unity. And I'm using the Miranite Teardrop of the Starweaver in here as the legendary gem, a staple in Condemn builds. Because it's holy, That means any of the holy damage you have on your gear is going to then add to that proc that comes off of the Miranai. So it's just going to be insane single target, which again is one of the weak points of this build. So anything you can do to prop that up, A+. The chest, you can see that we have strength and vit, and then we actually rolled for reduced damage from elites. This is actually a very strong affix on gear, and it's something that you definitely want to go for over all res. It's just going to take down the amount of damage that you're getting from elites by a significant factor. So it's almost a no-brainer. And you can see on the secondary, I actually managed to get some more reduction from melee. And I say some more because we're running a string of ears on the belt. This is a hugely defensive piece. And when you don't have to use CDR on other, when you have CDR on your other slots, I should say, then you don't need to run something like a Vigilante build. And this opens you up to run the String of Ears, which is going to be huge because, again, you're in melee range, you're taking melee damage from the mobs that you vacuum up next to you. So you want to reduce that damage as much as possible. So here, of course, this build reduces melee attacks. I believe it goes up to 30%. Yes, it does. And that chance to freeze on the secondary is also really nice too, because again, with the high proc coefficients of Condemn, pardon me, of Condemn and also of Slash with Zeal, makes it so that you'll be freezing things more than you think. Again, very defensive piece. This bracer is the cornerstone of this build. Because you're using vacuum, this bracer, you can see the legendary fix says enemies hit by knockback suffer 30%. I believe it goes from 25 to 30, or 20 to 30. Sorry about that. So 30 is the high max that you want to go for. And you're saying, well, I don't knock anything back, but actually vacuum is the inverse of a knockback, if you will. It knocks them back towards you. Wrap your head around that one for a second. But what that means is you're going to be benefiting from this whenever you vacuum mobs towards you. They'll have another 30% extra damage for 5 seconds after they get vacuumed in. So this is huge in terms of the damage output that you'll be doing. And again, with the synergy of pulling them in, then hitting them with the Bane of the Trapped, and then the extra procs from the Blade of Prophecy, it's just absolutely nuts. And again, the Blade of Prophecy here just gives you extra condemns. It only triggers once, so anything that you condemn will then also cast a condemn, but it doesn't keep chaining condemns after condemns, just one. But it's really powerful in groups because you'll just see tons of beautiful holy lightning from the sky, basically. And it's a thing to behold. When I run with 9ball or other people that I play with, they will always remark like, oh my goodness, there's so many things coming from the sky. And it's all the procs on not only the Miranai, but also on the Blade of Prophecy extra condemns. And the shield really brings it together, of course, because it takes away the cooldown, so you can essentially spam, in quotes, your condemns. There is a global cooldown on condemn, so you kind of get into a rhythm of using your condemn most efficiently. But it's pretty easy to master as you watch the condemn sort of refill its usage on your bar. You'll get a hang for the rhythm. And here there's a bit of things you can do with your shield. If you wanted to, you can drop the Vit here and go for Wrath Regen. And this is again where now you're getting the Wrath Regen here, so maybe you don't take Laws of Valor with Unstoppable Force. But I kind of like having the Vit, and I don't mind using that slot for Laws of Valor with Unstoppable Force, so it's been working for me, and that's how I'm gearing with it right now. But this is also another spot where you want that cooldown reduction to help you meet that cap. And lastly, your boots. Pretty standard, strength Vit, all res, and then movement speed I actually have on here because the only other real stat you can get, there are no skills on boots that are useful for the Condemn build, but you could get life regen, and they are buffing that in 2.1.2, so it might be something to play with. But I like the 12% because then when you go into Paragon, then you can just do 13% for movement and then dump the rest into either strength or Vit, whatever you need to buff up. With the changes to Vit in 2.1.2 as well, just getting a nice boost, you actually have a lot more life than you used to. So you may not even, points you had in Vit they will be doing more for you for sure, but you may not even need them anymore because you'll be hitting a baseline life that you wanted to hit before. So yeah, that's pretty much my priority in the core slot. In offense, you would really want to go for cooldown reduction first, and then critical hit damage. Those two are going to get you really nice in terms of hitting that CDR cap that we keep referring to, and then also doing more damage. I like to go for attack speed third, actually, just because, again, it's going to help with the use of the generator and just getting more Wrath Regen And I just have always liked attack speed, so it's maybe a little contentious, but that's where I'm going with it. And then I do critical hit chance last. I'll assign that point right there, why not? In defense, I usually almost always go all res first, and then from there it's kind of up to you, but because armor gets such a nice buff with Akarat's champion, I'd usually like to go armor next, max that out, and then kind of split, as you can see I do, between life and life regen, because I like to have some natural healing, and you do get some from your Templar as well, but also having a nice boost to your life percent when you have a really nice Vit core, then you're just gaining like synergy and extra just all over the place. It's a beautiful harmony. Lastly, in utility, area damage is going to be huge, so you can either go for that first, or if you're feeling like you're still a little bit on the vulnerable side, then go for life on hit. But I would mostly say you should do area damage first, just for the extra deeps. Resource cost reduction, it's possible that you actually might want to go for that over life on hit. Again, it all depends on how your character is feeling, but the 10% isn't much, but it helps to take off a little bit. So now your condemns, instead of costing 40, if you only have the 10%, they now cost 36. You know, that's one extra one for every 10 basically. And then lastly, it's gold find, and sometimes you can move these things around if you want to focus on gold find in just regular rifts. But again, that's like you would use a whole different build for that. So I'll assign this to life percent. And then lastly, we can look at our follower gear. We're using a bit of a Thunder setup, Thunder Fury, just because the proc does some nice slowing to the enemies again. Kind of a nice CC, mirrors the effect of your Too Scared to Run in a way, and taking a lidless wall to get some of that extra lightning damage. This one isn't even all that great. You would want crit chance on here as well if you're trying to maximize your follower DPS. Of course, the main thing is having that extra unity on there, and then your follower can't die over here, and that way, you know, your follower's doing its job for you basically. In Greater Rifts, I like to run an Overwhelming Desire, which is a legendary that you can get from Act 3 bounties, and this will charm enemies every now and again. It doesn't work on Greater Rift Guardians, unfortunately, but what it does is once they're charmed, they take another 35% more damage, so you can just see the multipliers adding up in this build. It's pretty insane. And a Bull Kathos Wedding Band. It's been known to do some nice damage when the Templar is standing next to enemies. I'm not exactly sure on the details of it. People have said like 1% of their health or so. So it's not chump change, but it's not amazing DPS either. It's just kind of nice to have there. You set it and forget it basically. In terms of priority, I haven't even min-maxed this stuff, but you want some CDR on your follower because it does affect when they can do their heal. Speaking specifically to the Templar, it does affect the rate at which they can give you that heal, and that's mainly it. The charge helps too sometimes to get that stun off, but Inspire is really nice because it also again adds to your Wrath regen, and they actually nerfed it a little bit going into 2.1.2, but they called it a bug fix. And then of course some life per second here as well, but it's, you know, nothing big to write home about. And that is the build in a nutshell. If you guys want to see the build in action, I actually have a video that I did for the podcast. It's silent, so you know you can play some music or something else in the background while you watch it, but it just shows the build going through, I believe, a Greater Rift 42 here on the PTR, which might be equivalent to a 39 or so on live right now, give or take about 3. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, and I hope you use this build. If you do, hop into the comments and let me know.